Hello, welcome to Museum Moments. I'm Ellie Gettinger, and I am the Education Director at Jewish Museum Milwaukee. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we try to find some story to share new insight into our local Jewish community, the broader Jewish world, and just to kind of fill the void and to give people a sense of insight into our collections. Today, I am really excited about this story. And this was a story I knew nothing about before I started talking with my colleague, Jay Hyland, who's our archivist. And as we do our kind of spitballing over what would make a good museum moment, we knew we wanted this week to focus on international stories. So Molly, my colleague, on Tuesday talked about the Jews of Cochin. And when she started bringing up this kind of sense of talking about Jews of India, Jay had this brainstorm. An amazing brainstorm at that. He said, hey, did you know that the Jewish Community Center in Mumbai, that that is named for a person from Milwaukee? And in fact, it is. And there's very little pictures or things that you can find of this space of the community center there. But it's called the Evelyn Peters Jewish Community Center, and it was named in the 1990s. And if you check out their website, it says it was named for their beloved founder, a beloved founder, and it was named in her lifetime. And he knew that this lady, Evelyn Peters, had actually come from Milwaukee. And so I thought it was a remarkable story of how does a person from Milwaukee become the namesake for the JCC in Mumbai. And so today we are going to share and explore Evelyn Peters' story. In starting this story, we have to kind of do a little bit of an explanation about, and this is her, this is Miss Peters in, I believe, the early 60s. And this is the logo of the organization she worked for. And she worked for this organization for more than 4 decades. So she had this incredibly long tenure working for the Joint Distribution Committee, the JDC. The JDC was founded during World War I to respond to the needs of Jews in what was then Ottoman Palestine. And they saw this kind of global sense of Jewish community, and they saw this sense of responsibility, and they kept shifting priorities and changing priorities as the global community changed. So, but she didn't come from this vastly global standpoint. She was born in Milwaukee. Her parents were both Russian emigres. And in fact, her father, she didn't start out as Evelyn Peters. She started out as Evelyn Petronovsky. And her father was a furrier. She was born in 1924. This is an advertisement for his fur company that clearly he works with his brothers. One of his brothers actually did change the name to Peters, but Mr. Petronowski dies fairly young in his early 50s when Evelyn herself is only 13 years old. So he is not a huge part of her life. And she continues on. She goes to Washington High School. She starts at Milwaukee State Teachers College, and actually this Wisconsin State Teachers College. This is a picture of her in the middle. And she gets her training in early childhood education. She goes on to Iowa State, where she gets a master's in early childhood education, and actually starts working in Wisconsin, in Illinois, and then goes on to University of California, Berkeley, where she starts doing postgraduate work, and is really working on kind of the idea of what does early childhood education look like. In addition, how should early childhood education be implemented for people with developmental disabilities? So this is the 1950s that she's doing all of this work. And she hears about a job. And she hears about this job at the JDC. And the JDC is looking for someone to implement their daycare process in Tehran. Now, to this point, Evelyn Peters has never been on an airplane, but she hears about this job and starts talking to people about the work that the JDC is doing, and she is fascinated by it. This sounds like really compelling work, and she actually thinks when she's going to start that she's going to be working with 50 kindergartners in Tehran. There's a big shift there. I as my slideshow decides to go blank. This is actually from her collection at the JDC Archives. It's an amazing archive. They also have amazing collections online and resources. And I had the privilege this week of speaking to Linda Levy, who worked with Evelyn Peters for many years. And so it's always nice when you can hear from something. And she was lovely enough to share this oral history with me. And here's from the transcript. She says, "You won't believe it, but I had never traveled before I came to the JDC. I had never been on a plane until the JDC flew me to New York. I'm not an easy traveler, even today." Hold on to that, because as you hear about the rest of Miss Peters' life, it is amazing to know that someone who doesn't think of themselves as an easy traveler could take on the responsibilities that she did. I was complete, and the question was, how did she feel arriving in Iran? And she arrives in Iran in 1956. She'd never been outside of the country. She doesn't speak Farsi. And this is what she goes on to say: "I was completely at home. Everyone went on and on about culture shock, and my own family thought I was going to be so far away. Right from the very first day, I was made to feel welcome. I was made to feel appreciated. Coming into that JDC office, which remained family for me, and it's been that way for 36 years, I felt as though I belonged. I belonged in Iran. I may not have spoken their language, but I belonged there. I didn't feel strange. I didn't feel different. I made good friends there among the Iranian Jews." So it's really this amazing thing. And she comes in thinking there had been a typo and that she's supposed to organize a kindergarten program for about 50 students. In actuality, there's already a kindergarten running for 500 students. And the expectation is she's going to open another 500 student kindergarten within a year. And within a year, there are 1,100 students in Tehran in her kindergarten program. But the bigger part of this program is not just the kindergarten itself, it's the training capacity, that she has instituted a whole training system for mostly women who didn't have a lot of economic opportunities before this. And the way the training programs that she had been a part of, and the way the thought had been, is that you need to have all of this background and you need to have all of this training before you can even start working with children. But the women who were staffing her daycares had so much experience with children already because they had grown up in these large extended families where they were responsible for many children. So she shifted into this program where instead of having, everyone needed to be trained to be a teacher, they would come in and teach, but then they would also spend part of the day. So part of the day would be actually working and part of the day would be training with her. And much of that work was done through translators, but it sounds like very kind of Hamish and at home. And thousands of people were educated. This program was so successful that the JDC made it a whole Middle Eastern program. And in 1963, Ms. Peters moves to Geneva, where she then administers the program in Iran, in Morocco, and in Tunisia, and is working through all of these different countries and traveling to all these countries. Remember, she just says she's not a great traveler, and working through this process of instituting early childhood education globally. She actually, this idea of early childhood education and the importance of early childhood education predates Head Start in America. So it's really a remarkable story of thinking through and the Jewish community internationally saying, we are committed to making sure that we are creating youth who understand what's going on and are ready for school and are school ready, which is what happens. Even as she moves and changes, she continues to maintain Milwaukee connections. And throughout the decades in the Wisconsin Jewish Chronicle, there are many articles either by her or about her. And in this case, this article it's related to my discussion on Thursday, that NCJW has funded a scholarship for one of the women that she's been working with to come to UW Milwaukee and to learn about early childhood education there. So that connection really keeps going. NCJW funds some of her toy projects in Iran. She has all of these networks, and she comes and she speaks often here. She spends a month or two in Milwaukee every year to see her mother and her sisters who are still close by. And I think it's just this kind of amazing connection that she continued to say, I'm going to come to Milwaukee and I'm going to advocate on behalf of JDC, an organization that's funded by the Milwaukee Jewish Federation, and really show how those dollars are put to work. one thing that's clear from all of these articles is the power of story, that she always is bringing in first person narratives. She's talking about Eliyahu and how much he's grown and how this other student had been changed. And through her stories, you get a real sense of the impact of the daycare in the Middle East and how those are working. This is a picture of one of those discussions with the ladies in Milwaukee. You can see, I think this is the women's division younger group. And in the far side, on the far left, if you've got your eyes wide open, you can find Kathy Bernstein, the founding director of Jewish Museum Milwaukee. So always nice to see Kathy in any crowd, even if it's this crowd from the 1960s. She writes a manual on daycares that becomes a bestseller, and it's translated into multiple languages, and the UN actually adopts it as a working book as well. And it's just one of the many, many, many achievements that Evelyn Peters has. She goes on to continue her career in the JDC. She actually becomes the country director of Tunisia. She's the country director of Algeria in 1981. And in 1989, she comes to India. And I asked Miss Levy if that was like a hard transition to go from being in the Middle East, where she'd spent most of her career, to India. And Linda said no, that she just loved the people and the people loved her, and she loved getting into the community and learning about the culture and learning about everything that was going on there. And and she really worked to bring in not just these kinds of social service programs, but cultural programs that would explore Jewish life and practice and let people have an opportunity to take these on. And that became the genesis of the JCC in Mumbai. And when it came to time to kind of think about who we should name that JCC for, she was still the country director for the JDC, and they named it after her because she was such a beloved institution in the country. She ended her JDC career in Paris, but again, it's more than 4 decades of work. I think one thing that I found really interesting is this is an article from 1970, but I feel like this could have come out of a debate in the last year. She writes, or she was on an interview show for the radio in New York. It's called New York Tomorrow in 1970. And she says, "We therefore close our eyes to the fact that children are not being cared for." She went on to explain that it may not be coincidental that many countries in many parts of the world are far ahead of the United States in providing daycare centers for children. And she talks about this in terms of the Jewish community, but says, if we aren't providing appropriate daycare for kids, then their parents can't work or can't work as effectively. And beyond that, the kids are missing out on all of these great social emotional benefits. So I think this is a woman who really understood the importance of play, the importance of having kids meet where they are, and the importance of making sure that parents had a support system to understand what was coming out of it. And so today, with this museum moment, I salute her and all of her incredible hard work. And I'm so happy that I got the chance to tell a little bit. This is tip of the iceberg on Evelyn Peters. And it's my hope that, some of you can come back to me with stories that about Miss Peters or the Peters family, because we always love to engage and learn new stories this way. So thanks very much to Robin Cohen, who supports these museum moments. We love it. And we love the opportunity to get to learn new and different things. And if you want to learn more, there's so many of our collections and archives and objects online. You can go to jewishmuseummilwaukee.org. Right now, we're in the middle of a big social justice campaign for our end of year. So feel free to go and put a donation in there. We appreciate it. It helps us make sure that we can continue to maintain our level of work. Have a wonderful day.